Tonight we're going to be talking about Senate Bill 328 that was recently signed into law. Under this new law, California junior highs and middle schools can start required classes no earlier than 8 a.m. and high schools can start no earlier than 8:30 a.m. These guidelines go into effect next school year. Ryan Hahn from Strategic Consultants is working with us on this project. Please stay tuned for updates and be involved in the process. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Marshall. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ryan Hahn, and I am the owner and principal consultant for Strategic School Consultants, and I'm helping several districts in California right now with Senate Bill 328. It's a heavy lift, so to speak. There's a lot of things involved with moving school start and stop times, and I'm also very much so looking forward to having this conversation tonight so that we can kind of dive into what the law is. I have a presentation for you and to kind of talk about what's required of this mandate. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So the work that my company does is primarily on the West Coast, and we work with schools with logistical challenges and operational challenges. So Los Banos Unified School District we've been working together since last year, and we started our work on a routing efficiency study, which led to us working together to look at how we provide transportation services to students, the several thousand students that ride your school buses in your community to and from school, and how start and end times are impacted by the transportation system itself. So there's always a lot of conversation of why does transportation come up when we talk about start and end times for schools, and the short answer to that is, in this particular case, a lot of times the students with the greatest need ride the school bus to school. And so we need to be looking at how do we provide access to school using the school bus to the greatest number of students that are eligible to ride. And that is what my primary job is with working with Los Banos on this particular initiative. So we're going to talk about what Senate Bill 328 is. We're going to talk about what the task force is that we created and its advisory capacity role to the superintendent and assistant superintendent of business services. Also, we have a steering committee that is formed, working behind the scenes. Those are like operational directors and the assistant superintendent of business services that looks to see how much what our needs are and how many resources we have to do this. And like I said, this is an unfunded mandate by the state of California to move this, to move these bell times. And we're going to talk about the task force timeline as a whole. Look at some of the other considerations. You know, when we do have a mandate, we look at all of the other things that we can possibly do that could make the system better when we do have to move something that is such a difficult task as the start and end school times. And I've created a visual model for you to kind of see why we have to have this conversation and why we're engaging you. So what is Senate Bill 328? Well, Dr. Marshall briefly mentioned it in the beginning, but the school day for high school students at first period, when the daily attendance is counted, cannot start before 8:30 in the morning. And middle schools cannot start before 8 a.m. The definition in totality is here on the screen, but it does not prohibit school districts from offering classes to a limited number of students before those start times, but they cannot generate average daily attendance for any purposes or any apportionments of state funding. So that's why I said first period. So the science behind this movement was that adolescents are sleep deprived. and that the state of California decided with this legislation that they didn't want junior high age students starting before 8 a.m. and they didn't want high school age students starting before 8:30, so that they could sleep and be ready for their day. And right now, if you know your school district's bell times, you know that you have school districts, or excuse me, you know that your high school, one of your high schools is starting inside the 7 o'clock hour. So that's why we're having this conversation, because everybody can't start school at once if we move the high schools to 8:30, and we have to look at where the junior highs will land as well. This work has to be done by July 1st, 2022. So that's why we're engaging now with you to kind of solicit some feedback. You know, the feedback on a mandate is pretty simple. We want to know how this impacts you. We have to do it. We don't have a choice. This is legislation, but this is your opportunity to think about the things that you'd like us to consider as we're making this this big move in your community to adhere to the mandate. So, a task force in itself is purely an advisory role, and we answer to the superintendent and the assistant superintendent. Our role is to assess and review all of the factors and input that we receive, and all of the logistical challenges behind the scenes of moving the bell times for Senate Bill 328. We also want to advise on the needs and priorities, listening to our customers, which are our students and our parents, and looking for data-driven decision markers that we're looking for when we're looking at bell time models. My company runs bell time models, which means that once we get a little further down this process and we've collected feedback, we will actually use data from the transportation department to simulate how many buses it will take to accomplish the new bell times, how many bus routes, how long the students will be on the buses. We will compute all of that down within a 15-minute window. And then we also have to consider other things that aren't related to transportation. How is food service impacted? How is before and after school campus times affected to where the campus is open and students can get dropped off? How are all of those different things all intertwined in creating a finished product? So it's not simply we're not simply looking at this from a transportation standpoint, although that is the tail wagging the dog in this case. We need to make sure that whatever we put together is well thought out and vetted. And so you're going to see who is on that task force, and we have several principals. We have 2 athletic directors, we have an inclusion specialist, and we do have a member from the transportation department. We've already met 2 times in person, or actually once in person and once virtually, to kind of discuss what our goal is with this work. And these people are the people in your community that are taking feedback from the building level. And then I am actually coming out into the community in January and February. We will have 2 separate meetings posted for you to come meet me in person. This is the steering committee members. So we have the assistant superintendent of business services. We have our maintenance and operations director, the chief academic officer, and then we do have a transportation official on this as well. The steering committee is what looks at all the logistical challenges, and we have the honest conversation. When I make these bell time models, we have the honest conversation about, with limited resources to be able to do this work, what is the most cost-effective way to keep the most money in the classrooms as we move through this work together. So we're looking at utilizing school buses differently. We're looking at utilizing them more efficiently, coming out using technology in the transportation department to help with some of those challenges. And it will look different next year. to some degree, because we will be implementing a lot of technology with the implementation of the new bell times. So this is our timeline. So our work started last summer on Senate Bill 328, where Dr. Marshall invited me to present to the administrative team, the principals, and I think there were some teachers there. We had a full room where we really talked about the nuts and bolts of how all this works. Our steering committee and task forces began in September and October. And we've already held the first couple of meetings. This is our first virtual communication cafe being held. And then I will be going out into the community in January and February. Those will be announced and posted on the district website for you to actually come into person and to meet with me. And we're going to talk about more than just the informational pieces of this. We're actually, that's a chance for me to get to know you a little bit, and also for you to tell me your story and how the school start and end times impact your world. And if there is anything I can take from that as we build this new system of getting kids to and from school and making all of this adhere to the new mandate, I'm here to learn from you, and I want to help put all of these things together. But like I said, this is an advisory group to the superintendent. So I prepare formal written report. And these are things that the superintendent and the board will weigh and adopt, and from their lenses, what's best for the overall group of students. So while we, of course, want our feedback to be heard, I just want to make it clear when mandates come across like this, and there's a large group of people that we're serving, we are looking for solutions that do the greatest amount of good for the most people. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about this and how this will impact you. We have to get to Dr. Marshall and the Assistant Superintendent of Business Services by March, a plan that'll include what the new bell times will look like. And then I will do a formal presentation to the Board of Education. In April, we will adopt a bell time model for when all the schools will start and end. And in July, all the final communication of school bus routes will be sent out to parents at the latest to get that information for a school start in August, because this law is required to be implemented by July of 2022. So see, some of the considerations that we factor in kind of getting input from you and as we work through all the moving pieces, we're looking at this with an equity lens. How can we provide better service with the same amount of resources that we have? And in the transportation world, we provide an equitable service through access. We get kids to school through the use of the yellow bus. And what some of the fun pieces behind the scenes that I help districts do is I look at reutilizing the bus more than one time while it's out on a route to pick up the most students that it can inside the time frame. So that's why the school bell times don't all start at the same time, is so that the bus can drop off students and then go be reused to go get another load of students and then drop them at another building. So some of our work is, how do we plan that very finitely to where we know how many times we can reuse a bus to keep the ride times as low as possible, to create a greater level of access, and maybe look at some of the areas in the district that haven't had good service. And we want to know about those as well, that are eligible for service or that have inadequate walk spaces to get to school. Those are all things that we're looking at as we work through this. Some other things we're considering: 0 period and 8th period, childcare impact on families, the overall logistics to provide education and operational services in a cost-effective manner, And like I said, we will be soliciting your feedback through this entire process. So here's what we already know. We already know that the state legislature has decided that high school will start no earlier than 8:30 a.m. And due to school activities and athletics, Los Banos School District will honor as close to the 8:30 time as possible. However, we do know that we do have two different times for the high schools right now, and we're still studying why that is to see if it's still necessary moving forward. But that 8:30 time has already been decided by the district that we will adhere to that for high school start. And just so you know, in all of the challenges around getting about 2,000 students on these school buses to school, it's impossible to get all of those students to school without other adjustments. And I've created this visual for you to see that you have a late high school and an early high school, which is how they were staggered. And if you look at your current bell times, you know that you have one that starts after that 8 o'clock timeline and one right before. The yellow piece is the morning bus commute. The green piece is the school day. And the blue piece is the afternoon bus commute. The way that the bus routes are set up in this particular school district, since the routes are very rural in nature, they drop off kids in town and then all the buses head out of town in different areas to disperse students. And some of those age groups ride together to get home. But I want you to look at some of these elementary school bus ride times in the afternoon. Some of those students are on the bus over 90 minutes to get home because of the way that the system is set up. It's not because somebody made a bus route purposely to do that. It's because the bell times in the afternoon don't allow that bus to be reutilized again. So when we're looking at moving the high schools all back to that 8:30 start time, you'll see that impacts directly with the junior high, and that the elementary schools, there may not be enough room between the elementary school routes and the high school routes to have enough time to reutilize the buses. So that's the purpose of our work, is trying to figure out a way to keep ride times as minimal as possible, to use the least amount of resources that we can to get the most kids to school in alignment with the new law and the new times. So like I said, there's lots to think about. This is just the beginning of the process of our engaging with you. We're going to review any feedback we get from you on this session. There's an email address on my last slide that I will read out, and that is a great way for you to connect directly with me. We have evening committee and work meetings already scheduled out into the winter and early spring. And then I will start with all the data that we gather, begin planning bell time models that can facilitate the later start time, and hopefully provide a higher level of service. So the last piece is we're assessing current and future student program, master planning, and scheduling needs. That's where I asked the chief academic officer and other administrators in the district, are you planning on holding specific programs at different buildings that we'll have to bus kids to around the district? So we're not looking at this just from 22-23, but we're looking at this long-term, long range, because we don't want to have to go through this process again anytime soon. So we want to hear from you. We've set up a special email box, and you can see it there on the screen. It is not the typical email box that you're used to seeing. This is a Google email box, so it's sb328@losbanosUSD.net. Pay attention to that address, but this is a special mailbox that the district controls, just to hear from you on what your thoughts are. If there's anything that you'd like us to consider as a parent, as a community member, as a staff person, as we start going through this process together. Like I said, there will be many ways for you to connect with me Keep your eye on the district webpage as we will start advertising those in-person meetings in January and February. And then we will present some findings back as we get closer to the decision time of getting ready to prepare a formal documentation source to go to the superintendent and the board. So again, my name is Ryan Hahn. I own Strategic School Consultants, and I'm pleased to be working with you and your community through this process. If you have anything that you'd like to discuss with me in relation to this bill, or have any questions about how this may impact you, please email. And just know we will not be throwing out hypothetical bell times for any of the other schools until we've gathered all of our input and all of our feedback. And then we will start working through scenarios together. So thank you very much. And Dr. Marshall, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, well, to close, we want to apologize. We had tried to do something different as far as with a process to kind of eliminate the need for translation in real time. But sometimes those things don't work out. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put this presentation up. We'll put a version up in English. There'll be a version in Spanish for everybody. And watch it. And I want to encourage you all to participate. I mean, Ryan said to give him feedback. This is your opportunity to give feedback. There'll be some community meetings that he talked about. You're encouraged to come out. So we look forward to seeing you at those meetings. With that being said, thank you for tonight, and give us some feedback on the presentation today. Thank you.